Hey folks, it's Chris with the Human Project Podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about a helpful stance for how we approach conflict. And that is a stance of curiosity. How do we ask questions and how do we start to explore what's actually going on beyond just trying to solve and deal with the conflict that is right in front of us? And so what we're going to talk about is a new muscle that is building curiosity and leading with that instead of our normal stance of trying to protect. What does that reveal about humility, and how do we invite God into that conversation? Take a listen. Let us know what you think. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Chris.
How's it going?
It's a good morning. How about you?
Yeah, it's also a good morning for me.
Excellent.
Now that a lawnmower is not going.
Yeah. We have to deal with real life stuff like sounds all around while we're trying to record.
Yeah.
It happens.
It produces this like tension and like conflict.
Yeah.
Because somebody is not respecting that we're trying to record a podcast.
Unbelievable.
Oh my goodness.
It's just completely ununderstandable. I don't even know what we're going to do.
Roll with the punches.
Okay.
There you go. So, conflict.
Yes.
One of our favorite topics to talk about.
No, it's not.
Oh, I thought it was.
I'm just trying to produce a conflict here now.
Well, now I have a conflict.
Let me reflectively listen. You're mad.
I think you need to go back to the reflective listening episodes if that's your idea of reflective listening.
I am now.
Yeah. Just a bonus. Don't ever tell anybody that they're mad. It doesn't work out.
In a sense, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
they
a little
will be
bit.
As soon as you tell them that.
A little bit.
Not recommended.
So we've talked about conflict before, but I think what we wanted to talk about with this episode is a way that we can approach and lead into conflict that is more open-handed and more about less around distinct resolution, which I think that's most people's default stance when we talk about conflict.
Yeah.
Is I just want to get it over and dealt with.
Yeah.
And I think that is a way that we miss opportunities for growth.
Yeah. We kind of want to fix the situation, or we want to have everybody agree on the same exact thing, which would be what I believe, right? Of course. Yeah. Everybody agrees with me. And yeah, I think there's some richness in there that we're missing. That's a really good way of framing it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the word that you like to use often is curiosity.
Yeah.
So how does curiosity help us when we start to approach a conflict situation?
I think, first of all, my nickname is question mark. So that betrays my curiosity stance. That's just the button that I will hit frequently as I wonder about things. I get curious about things.
What?
That's not exactly how it sounds, but sure.
Why did you do that? What's that? What do you think that is costing you? I'm going to create a mark bot.
Wow. You don't even need me anymore. Just hit the little recording button there.
Absolutely not true, my friend. The richness and like knowing the way that you ask questions often is immense gift that I greatly appreciate.
I'm glad it's beneficial because it's the button I've got. I'm going to keep hitting it. I heard somebody recently say that, it's better to get curious than furious.
Oh, there's a nice little soundbite.
I know. I thought it was really good way of looking at it. And I think it gives us a little picture of what I think we have at our disposal here with curiosity, is that instead of just saying, well, don't be mad. Like instead of just saying, don't whatever, right?
Yeah.
Don't just hold your opinion so tightly. Don't just get mad at the other person, et cetera, et cetera. Don't require that they agree with you. Well, what's the alternative? Yeah. And I think a tremendous alternative is curiosity. That the same person who said that quote said that they had heard somebody say, you cannot... there are two different gears, and you cannot be in the furious gear if you engage the curious gear. So it shifts your brain into a different spot that opens up the conversation, exactly what you're talking about, to be in relationship with the other person in the midst of whatever, whether you agree on it or not, whether it's resolved or not, but you maintain the relationship, and that's the richness available to us.
Yeah. Let me pick that apart a little bit. I like that, curious, not furious. And I think what's really helpful with that is we spend a lot of time like telling people what not to do.
Yeah.
As humans, that just doesn't work for us. Our brains don't think in the negative. Like even Sophia, my 2-year-old, almost 3-year-old, like telling her like, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. Like that just becomes overwhelming and exhausting for kids. And it's the same for us as adults. What we need to know is like, what does a good redirect look like? What is a good behavior? What are we called into? Instead of just like, stop doing this, but what's the replacement?
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you keep having this void, like your brain is geared towards simplifying. So if you don't have a replacement for that, it's going to go back to its default.
I like to look at it kind of like water flowing. Like if you had a stream flowing downhill and you just said, well, let's just stop the flow of the stream, and you put a block in the way. What does the water do? It keeps coming. Watch your language. No. But it keeps coming, right? You're either going to create this big pool, but that means you're going to have to keep building more walls, or it's going to overflow or flow around. That there's in a sense, when we have tension and conflict, there's an energy, a direction that is coming within us.
Yeah.
And so either we deal with it and redirect it, as you said, to something that's helpful and healthy relationally and is rich, or else we continue in the same patterns that we're used to, which may not be that healthy and helpful.
Yeah, I like that. So not furious, but curious.
Yeah.
So what would that curiosity look like in conflict as opposed to like our default stance?
Yeah, so if we look at it to another analogy, since I just love analogies, I should get a nickname about analogies because I use them all the time. We'll work on that. Okay, next episode maybe. But if we have, say, like our hand tightly gripped around our opinion, our perspective, or what we're trying to defend because we're afraid of something, all the things that can go on inside of us during a conflict, then it's going to be really hard to open our hands to be willing to connect with the other person because we've got our hand in a fist clenched around something. And so I think curiosity is a way of us opening our hands, not that we're letting go of our opinion, not that it doesn't exist, but that instead maybe we open the other hand in this analogy and we're willing to go like, I wonder about a few things, like what's going on with the other person that I'm talking to right now. What's going on inside of them? What's driving this? What's going on in their day today? Even just getting curious about the other human here is one thing that we can do. There's a few other things we can get curious about, but that's just an example of how do I start kind of wondering and being open to other things that are going on other than what I'm trying to defend against or what my opinion is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And I think what that gives credence to is for all of us, there's stuff going on underneath the surface.
Yeah.
So even just that is a revelation of like as you were talking about that, I'm like, well, my thought is like, I need to get this solved, or like we've talked about relationship being inherently inconvenient.
Yes.
Many times on this podcast. And I think that's a great example of it because what you're dealing with there is how do you deal with somebody else's heart, emotions, what's going on in their life? And that is a pause away from me. And so it's requiring humility.
Yeah.
It's requiring that I don't get my way. So it's the loss of selfishness. And it's putting focus on like maybe the other person just needs like to be listened to be heard, to have somebody reach out. And maybe the issue that we're dealing with, maybe it is a big deal, but maybe it's also not a big deal. Absolutely silly example.
Okay.
So Victoria and I love each other very, very much. I'm going to preface the story with this.
I was going to say, this is great if that's the way you have to start the story.
But we love to pick at each other's words. Like when one of us says a word that's really silly, like we're like, I think you meant to say this word. And so she still maintains her innocence in this.
Oh boy. Now you're giving us some ammunition for
We've decided to park this.
Okay.
And just agree to disagree. But we got in this really big argument because she said, I say that she said the word, instead of saying relentless, she said relentless.
Which is not a word.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I suppose it's a word. It doesn't exist.
I think of like Mr. Lunt from VeggieTales, relentless.
Right.
And she's like, I did not say that. Like, yes, you did. She's like, no, I did not. I'm like, I heard it. And she's like, I said it. And we went back and forth. And it kept escalating. We're like, why are we arguing about this?
It's one of those ones you want the instant replay flag you can throw.
Yeah, exactly. The progressive commercial.
Right. Yeah.
But like at some point I'm like, okay, one, this is not important. I'm just trying to prove that I was right. She's just trying to prove that she was right. There's absolutely nothing to be gained from either of us winning. Because if you're winning an argument, the other person you're dealing with is a loser.
Yeah.
That's not what you want. You don't want to call people that are close to you a loser. But I think it was just a really silly example of how we can be so prideful. And I had just as much share in this. Be so prideful of like, this is what was said, instead of like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And there are things that are worth arguing for and standing for.
Yeah.
And we've talked about where that leads with collaboration all the way to confrontation against like a biblical standard even sometimes.
Right.
But all of this needs humility. It's an example of what's going down at the root.
Yeah. I like that you picked an example that isn't, political or like you said, it's not a biblical issue per se.
It's definitely not.
Maybe, I don't know. We could find relentless in the Bible, but anyway.
The Greek word is actually relentless.
But I think we tend to, I'm not sure that we would explicitly say this, but I see the tendency, and I see it in myself as well, that the more important something is, like if we say it's, it's a biblical issue, then what we must do is we must up our, if you will, our argument, or how strongly we are holding on to our opinion in order to convince the other person that that's the appropriate technique for it, which is kind of arguing against the curiosity. Like it would be relatively easy in the situation that you said to go like, maybe I get curious about what's going on with Victoria, instead of saying, no, you said relentless. Like, okay, that was a great example, because you're kind of like, why are we arguing about this? But there are things that are worth arguing about, to your point.
Well, I'm wondering if that's true, because I think at that point when you're arguing for something, it's why is this so important?
Yeah.
Like it's a different curiosity. It's less about the other person's position, which still is good to help them understand and use that to shift and negotiate, I guess, or help sell or help convince. And that's not always our job. Something is convincing somebody they're wrong about something. It's normally a losing proposition.
Yes.
But why do I believe this so firmly? And that can be a great curiosity spot of maybe stuff that we've just accepted or we've heard for years. And we're like, that was something that was settled in my brain. But why? Why is that so important to me? Or where do I see evidence of that? So I think it's curiosity, just less curiosity for the other person and more curiosity about the belief.
I think it depends on, like you said, what the goals are. Absolutely. And I like if you will, like the default move, I'm going to be curious about myself. What am I trying to defend? Why am I holding this so tightly? Exactly what you just said. Because that can reveal my motivation. Yeah. That can reveal whether or not my belief is correct. The way I'm holding it may not be helpful or healthy. And so that, those are both things worth considering. I'm not saying one or the other. They're absolutely both, but they're distinct things. Yeah. And so I think getting curious about our perspective is tremendous. So getting curious about the other person, getting curious about our perspective, and getting curious about the other person's perspective. Right. I think are three areas that we could get curious about as well. And if we are trying to convince the other person of something, all three of those, I think, together are a really powerful way to try and do it. Yeah, because then it becomes let's explore it together. Yeah. And here's why, here's the rationale, invite their perspective. Yeah. Whether it's something that is absolutely true, like a biblical standard, or whether it's how we are even viewing a situation or approaching a situation or a decision that we need to do. That's where those requests, that perspective, all the other things that we've talked about in the past can come into play. Yeah. I mean, if we're not willing to get curious about the other person and their perspective, how are we expecting them to get curious about us and our perspective to explore that together? Yeah. Which is ideally what you're doing anyway. Not to mention, just let's put over top of all of this, kind of this coating of, as you say, humility. I might be wrong. What? I mean, right? Even on the hypothetically, hypothetically, of course. But even on the most firmly held belief, it's possible that I don't have that exactly 100% accurate. Yeah. And if that's not something that I'm willing to at least consider, then this conversation with another person about the topic is probably going to be pretty challenging for me to get curious about the other person in any way whatsoever. Because that's what I'm asking them to do also, is hold their opinion with some humility.
Right.
And that's usually how you find your way through it, which may or may not be what happens.
Yeah.
Because as you said rightly a minute ago, just to call that back out, it's not necessarily our job. It's God's. Now he may use us. He may call us to do certain things, to convince other people of things, to call other people into things, or away from things. And yet that is not my responsibility, is not their reaction either.
Yeah. But it changes how I approach it, not just drawing the line in the sand, but inviting different perspectives and even self-curiosity of exploring it with myself.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And what I think, again, just calling back what you said earlier, just pulling it through like a thread, contextually here, what we're talking about, getting curious is not a bad thing to do at all, but doing it for the purposes of relationship, because that's what God made us for, right? If we want to find richness, which is what I think God's calling us to find this richness and connection with each other, then this is our opportunity to do that. And this approach is our opportunity to do that, really. And I think that's really the value and the benefit of getting curious.
Yeah, a posture of curiosity. Absolutely.
Yeah. If we're doing this with God, then this is what God asks us to do. Because look, at the very least, fourth curiosity that we didn't talk about before, right? We talked about curiosity about the other human being, curiosity about perspectives, two of them, mine, the other person's. Probably would have been good for us to start with curious about what God thinks about all this.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
So, and maybe that's just a thread through all three of those. What does God think about this other person? What's going on that he wants me to know about the other person, about my perspective and situation, about their perspective?
Yeah.
That ongoing conversation with Abba is essential in order to get curious. We could even misuse curiosity, absolutely, to try and manipulate other people and do it in an ingenuine way.
Yep.
But doing it with true humility requires us to be saying, I'm submitting to Abba and what he's up to right now in this situation, this person.
Yeah. Let's bring all those things together. Go to curious, not furious.
Yeah.
Redirect.
Why would you say that?
Oh, question mark strikes again.
Sorry. I'll turn the curiosity off for the time being.
Thanks for exploring that, buddy. That was good.
Excellent.
Yeah. Hey, folks. Thanks for listening today. Our team is made up of myself, Chris Conlin, Mark Wavle, and our lead editor is Derek Donley. We are a crowd-funded nonprofit, and our free resources exist because of generous support from people like you. If you'd like to learn more about what we're about, go to humanproject.us, join us for classes, check out other episodes of the podcast, or if you want to, feel free to support us and donate financially. We'd really appreciate that. It helps us be able to sustain that. If there are topics or things that you're interested in us talking about, email us at info@humanproject.us.